Hi everyone, welcome to Christchurch Bromley and welcome to this latest in our series of COVID conversations. Maybe this is the first one you've seen, maybe you've seen some of the other ones before, whatever. You're really welcome with us tonight as we think about this topic of unemployment. Let me just give you a rundown of what the evening is going to look like. If you're watching it live, then the times that are just about to appear on the screen for you will give you an idea, and if you're watching this later, you're going to work you hard on your maths. It's 30 minutes worth of interview, 10 minutes of reflection from me, and then if you're watching live, the extra bonus of getting a chance to ask questions and answers. Our hope tonight is that you find this inspiring, engaging, that you sense some of the hope that Christianity gives people in the midst of what life throws at us. And it might be that you will want to take another step of going to see some of the other COVID conversations that are out there. There are some up on the screen coming up for you that will show you some of the previous topics we've coped with. How do we cope when everything changes? How do we find hope in a fragile world? Or maybe you'll want to join us for one of our interactive courses run by Christianity Explored Ministries, and you'll see that coming up on the screen as well. But welcome to tonight. Welcome as we look at this topic of unemployment. And it's great to welcome with me three people here who have all experienced unemployment recently. We've got Roger Dundee, and we've got Ken and Taron Bracey. Welcome to the party.
Thanks,
that is COVID Conversations. I'm going to ask you a few questions now. Just give the people watching a sense of who you are, what your life's been like. Just give us a sense of how you became a Christian, and then a sense of how the difference being a Christian has made. So let's kick off with Ken and Taron. Just tell us a bit about yourselves. Who's going first?
Right, well, we're Ken and Taron, originally from South Africa.
Oh, you never guess from the accent.
No. Ken's got dual nationalities, so we arrived in the UK in 2013. We've been married for 9 years next month and have two daughters. Isla just turned 5 and Eliana is 8 months. We moved to Bromley in 2014 to attend Christchurch Bromley, and I'm currently on maternity leave, but I'm an accountant by trade.
And Ken, tell us about you.
Yeah, you could say I'm a recovering solicitor. So I started life as an attorney in South Africa, moved to the UK, and I've worked in the payments industry pretty much since 2013. Most recently...
It means absolutely nothing to me, but I'm sure it's like
think
the
Visa
most
and
gripping
MasterCard
thing
and...
you've got, the most gripping thing ever. But tell us about something about Google.
Yeah, really interesting. 2 weeks before I was made redundant, I got a call from Google saying they'd seen my CV and they really wanted me to interview for a position. And at the time, I said to the recruiter, "Well, listen, thanks very much for the interest, but during COVID, I've got a stable job, so I'm going to pass on it." And 2 weeks later, I got notified that I was being made redundant, so I phoned up Google as quickly as I could, but unfortunately the role had already been filled. So yeah, it just goes to show that you don't know what's around the corner. Nothing is certain.
And how long have you been looking for a job now, and how's that been going?
Yeah, my last day was the 31st of July, so
Okay.
I've been looking for about 2 months now.
How many jobs have you applied for, do you know?
Close, 50, somewhere around there, quite a few. I had a few interviews, but nothing's quite landed yet, and that's frustrating. But yeah, it's just a continuous search. Every day you're looking at different jobs and applying.
And Rog, let's turn to you. Just tell us a bit about yourself and job situations.
So I've lived in the Bromley, Beckenham area for about 25 years. Those of you who get here may have picked up that I'm not from here originally, so I'm originally from Belfast.
Yeah, again,
so we like foreigners.
We like quite this accent thing.
So I did my degree over in Belfast and then came to London not in the search for a job. I had a job before I came. The idea was I'd come over, get some experience, take that back, and be the whiz kid in Belfast. But unfortunately, I didn't ever go back. Well, maybe not unfortunately. Fortunately, yeah.
You told me you love it.
The plan didn't come to fruition. So I'm in IT. Since 2012, I've been an IT project manager. At that stage, I was working for Kimberly-Clark, so they make things like Andrex and Kleenex, stuff like that. The Andrex puppy, obviously, is a big, well-known character. So I worked from there, and I was actually with Kimberly-Clark for 15 years, and managed to miss redundancy 6 times in a row, but the 7th was unfortunate. So at the end of 2018, I was made redundant. But I was very fortunate in that I was only redundant for about 6 weeks, and I managed to get a fixed-term contract with Penguin Books, so Penguin Random House. So I was there. It started off 12-month contract. They extended it to 18 months, which was fantastic. And my hope was they would turn it permanent. And all the signs looked good, so I was working hard. I was trying to do everything to improve my chances. And ironically, at the end, they said, well, your area is very good, Roger. We don't need you. We can let you go. So
you did it so well.
Unfortunately, yeah.
And they remember, they worked you hard right up until the deadline,
absolutely.
Didn't they? Yeah.
Absolutely. So they said cheerio and let me walk out the door. And because I'd only been there 18 months, there was no redundancy. There was nothing. It was just a cheerio. Fortunately, from a financial point of view, I had a redundancy package from Kimberly-Clark. And I didn't squalor all of that.
Yeah, prudent.
That's good to keep some of it. So that's keeping me going for the minute.
Yeah. And how's the job search been going? Well, I know it's been pretty frustrating.
Yeah, so I've been looking probably since May. Like Ken, I've probably applied for about 50 different jobs, and some of the jobs, they take forever to apply for, especially the civil service ones. They're all very different, so I can spend almost a day doing that, and then you hear nothing back. And that happens with so many of them. I think out of the 50, I've only heard back from about 6. So it starts to make you think, is it really worth applying if you're not even going to hear back? You put all this effort in, and it just seems to be wasted. So, yeah, keep going. I keep going.
Yeah, but it sounds like you've really kind of as a project manager, you've really project managed yourself through quite a lot of this. So you've just been like, get up at the right time, just treat finding a new job as a job. Pretty much. I'm lucky I've got a dog who gets me up, so I have to feed her. I like going for a run in the morning, so I do that a couple of times in a week. So I do. It is important to have a routine. I think if I didn't have a routine and I wasn't doing things, it would be very difficult. But yeah, just that sense of frustration.
Absolutely.
People not even bothering to honour the 5 hours you spent filling out the form.
Exactly. That's it. It's become very frustrating.
Yeah, I can imagine. Just Ken, Taran, just tell us a bit about how you found the last few months. Like, what have been some of the, if you don't, thanks for being willing to be honest, but what have been some of the kind of darker moments for you guys?
Yeah, it can get very dark because you don't know what the future holds. So you're often trying to think, well, what's life going to look like in 6 months' time, 12 months' time? Am I still going to be in the same situation? And it can feel quite hopeless, especially if you're not getting responses and it doesn't seem like your efforts are going anywhere. You feel quite useless. And I think, the other side of it is the level of self-doubt, increases as well. So the more you don't get an answer, the more you think, there's a problem with me. That's why I'm not hearing back. And obviously, every day that you don't have a job, that tension, that pressure to get a job ratchets up another notch every day. So yeah, that's been my experience of it.
Taran, you want to say something to this? So
yeah.
You've not lost the job.
I've not lost my job.
You were on maternity leave as
on
this
maternity
happened, but just what's it been like, sort of having the added financial pressure and.
So we are very blessed, and we were quite wise with our maternity package, and we've got the months. But again, that is a deadline. You have only so many months. And I will be returning full-time in January. But for me personally, my dad was made redundant at the age of 52 after working in the same company for 35 years back in South Africa. And it destroyed him in the sense that he lost who he was, he lost his identity. And when I look back at that, he still had his girls, like he's got, well, it's myself and my sister and my mom, and you can't see, you couldn't see past that. Like when someone goes into such a dark place, you can't come out of that. So this situation is very, like, does remind me a little bit in the sense that, gosh, we're at the start of where my dad was. So I do feel that anxiety again in terms of being the correct support for Ken, you know, correcting and pointing him back to where we stand and what we believe in, which I think is quite obviously
It's enormously beneficial.
and it's our rock of where we are. Ken's identity is not found in a job or who he is in the industry that he works in, and it's great that he has that experience. So for me, it takes me right back to there. So it's just reminding every day that it's not really the be all and end all.
Yeah, and just that sense of perspective. But it just, I mean, it's just interesting, isn't it? Like there are so many, you know, as there have been so many different versions of lockdown, and every person's had a different experience of lockdown. Every single person like watching tonight will have had if they've experienced redundancy, they'll have had a different experience of redundancy, and they'd have had different levels of support financially or people around them. And these are just the stories of the people that we've got in front of us, and this is the reality of the hard bits that they've had to face, and we just want to hear from them what difference being a Christian makes. And but before we can do that, I guess we just need to wind the clock back and find out how they actually became Christians themselves. So we're just going to kick off with Ken. You have to kick off, Ken.
Yeah, sure.
How did you become a Christian?
Very interesting story. I grew up in a non-Christian household. My mom was quite New Age, very hostile towards Christianity. And my first experience of Christianity wasn't a positive one. You know, I found Christians to be very sort of legalistic and a bit hypocritical, and you know, my mother was very hostile, and so I became hostile. The longer things went on, the more hostile I became, which sort of culminated at university, where about 15 or 20 of us were sitting on a lawn outside the law faculty, and these Christians on campus had walked past handing out flyers, and I stood up and I knocked the flyers out of the Christians' hands, saying, "This religion is a crutch for weak people. Don't come here. We're smart, we're ambitious. We don't need a crutch for weak people. Get out of here." And my friends laughed. They thought it was hilarious, but I felt guilty. You know, I realized that this guy hadn't done anything to me, and here I am, you know, embarrassing him. But I kind of swallowed my guilt and carried on till about a year later, where life seemed to just crumble in front of my eyes. A relationship that I was in kind of exploded. My grandfather passed away in very tragic circumstances. We had to look after him. And my 12-year-old sister said to me, "Ken, you might as well go to church because your life's not going to get any worse." And I thought, well, she's right. So I went to church and I did the usual thing of sitting in the back with my arms folded, with the intention of running out as soon as the service finished. But a Christian collared me afterwards, and he started speaking to me. And he was just genuinely interested in me, and this blew my mind. I couldn't understand why he'd even care. But he got me plugged into a Bible study, and I went to this for about 6 or 9 months. Apparently, I don't really recall so well, but I was very difficult. I was just trying to poke holes in everything.
You difficult, Ken? I can't imagine it, surely.
Yeah, well, I was painful. But I came to realize that I had a serious problem. There was something wrong with my heart. And things needed to change. But the core question for me was, is this true? Because if it's not true, it doesn't matter. If it is true, now I've got to make some changes. So I spent a lot of time just looking at the evidence, kind of applying my law degree, just looking at the evidence to see if it was believable. And I became a Christian in 2009. I gave my life to the Lord.
Great. We'll come to hear what difference that makes in a moment, but let's just go around and hear others' stories. Taran, how did you become a Christian?
I was raised Catholic, very much tick box, and so we did what we had to do in order to, First Holy Communion, confirmation, and I just went along with it. And I remember Sunday school every week. There was no real mention of Jesus. It was just the Old Testament stories, really. My sister's confirmation came along, and she asked me to be her sponsor. And part of that was we had to go to confession with the priest. And I was a young adult and experiencing life's big questions at that time. My dad had been made redundant, and there was a lot of things going, gosh, what is happening? And I questioned the priest, and I said, I don't think there is a God. And I don't think I was being, a snarky adolescent.
I
thought I was genuinely answering, and I was asking, and I was greeted with just 3 Hail Marys, and you'll be fine. And I was
just
like,
wanted you to go away and just say Hail Mary 3 times.
I felt like I was reaching out, and I got nothing in response. And that was me, really. I was done. And I walked away, went down a very long road, came back with moving cities for a job. And my cousin in the new city was a Christian. She had been converted. I thought they were strange. But I went along to church. I wasn't opposed to God. I just didn't think, he was there. I thought he was a big booming voice who was just going to tell me I was wrong. And I didn't do everything I was supposed to do. And I started doing a Bible study with a lady from the church, just for starters, and discovered Jesus. And that really opened up my mind, opened it up for going, well, who's Jesus and what significant is that? And John 3:16 was the verse we had to look at, which is quite a famous verse. For God so loved the world that he sent his only son. But for me, John 3:17 was the one that hit home for me based on how I grew up. And it was how Jesus came in to save the world, not condemn it. And I thought, actually, that makes sense. I can't, I'm not good enough.
People can be so persuaded, can't they, that God is out to jump on the first mistake and condemn, whereas he's saying, no, I've come to save the world. I'm not ignoring the truth about failure and how we've stuffed up in our lives and in our relationship with him, but he's saying, no, I've come to save the world, to find a way to make a way for forgiveness.
And so that for me was the relational aspect that I think I had always been lacking. It was always God being the big booming voice. And, I was always going to get struck down by lightning walking into a church, and discovering Jesus through the pages of the Bible in a manner that was, it was helpful. It really did open my eyes. And so that was me.
Oh, and I know I've heard some more. I heard some of the extra bits you're skipping over there. In the kind of, when you say a pretty dark road, like there were some dark moments in there, and maybe another time if people want to catch you and hear more of that story, they can. But Ken, who are you?
Roger.
Roger, you're Ken. Roger, just tell us, how did you become a Christian?
Slightly different again. I grew up in a family that attended church. So from an early age, I would go every week. I went to Sunday school. And at a really early age, I think it was 5 or 6, I can remember coming home from Sunday school one day, and the guy that had taught me had said, there's some things that people do that just separate you. I don't know, I'm sure he did it much more simply than that. That you just need to say sorry for the bad things that you do to Jesus. And I remember saying a very, very simple prayer at that point. If I then jump forward maybe 7 or 8 years, I was, 13, 14, I think I was. The school I went to had a big Christian union. I'd continued going to church the whole way through, but I started going to the Christian union as well. And they then had Bible studies every other week, so we're starting to look into things in more depth. And things started to click, thinking, okay, I've been to church all my life, but that's not what makes me a Christian. That's not what the Bible says makes you a Christian. It's a personal commitment to Christ and accepting him as your Savior and asking him to forgive you for all those things, and then trying to live as best you can as he shows you in the Bible. So that's what I've been trying to do for the last 30 plus years.
And it's just always plain sailing, right? It's just like
No.
never a day that's hard. Yeah,
No,
we know that's
lots
not,
of
we know
ups and
that's
downs,
not
lots and
true.
lots of ups and downs. You know, you have good days, you have bad days. But the thing that's constant is Christ's love for you.
Yeah.
You know, however far you think you are from Christ, he's always there for you. The words are in the Bible, you know, he's waiting for you to come back.
Yeah. No, and that's, yeah. I mean, I guess people watching in will be able to guess some of the ways that this makes a difference as we face unemployment. But Ken, why don't we come back around to you? Like, just try and put it into words for us. What difference does being a Christian make as you face unemployment? It doesn't mean you won't face unemployment. You're a proof of 3 Christians who are experiencing that right now. But what difference does it make in the face of unemployment, being a Christian?
Well, having met Jesus and knowing that he loves me is a huge comfort, because I know that being God, he's in control. It's not as though I got made redundant and God was suddenly wrong-footed and thought, oh, I hadn't planned for this, what are we going to do now? He's in control. And it goes even further than that. He's a loving father who loves me and allows these things to happen to me. And we can trust that Jesus uses all of these bad things for our good if we love him. And so I might never know the answer, I might not have the answer in this life, but I can trust that this pain and this frustration isn't wasted. It's going to be used one day. And one day I'll see the picture clearly. And that gives me hope and great comfort that I'm not alone, that God is with me, he loves me, he cares for me even now. And that's where I get most of my comfort from, is just remembering who God is for me and what he's done for me and how much he loves me. So I found that quite helpful.
We were talking about the tapestry thing earlier on.
Yeah.
Just tell us about that.
Exactly. It's like a tapestry looking at it from behind. I don't know what the tapestry looks like. All I can see is a mess of strands behind.
A tiny little section of
Yeah,
that.
tiny little section of that. So I don't even know what the tapestry looks like. But one day there's that assurance that I'll be able to see the picture that God is forming. So right now it looks messy, it's scary, I don't have the full picture. But one day I will.
Yeah, and that doesn't stop unemployment, but it must relativize how you process the hard things that the Lord
it's about
allows.
the perspective. It doesn't feel like it's the worst thing. There's a larger perspective behind it. And once you understand all of these pieces, how powerful he is, how loving he is.
Taran, what sort of particular truths of Christianity kind of most help you, would you say?
Well, I was reading Isla a Bible story the other day, and it was where Jesus is telling the people, the birds don't worry, the sparrows don't worry about what they eat, and the flowers don't worry about the clothes. And for me, I know that the creator of the world, and we've investigated the evidence of who God is and his character, he loves and he will provide. And it won't be like we're going to get everything that we desire or that we think we want, because we know that that's not how God works. And our biggest prayer is God's will. So whatever life does come with, we know that God is in control, that he loves us and he provides for us, which is good for us. So it might not be the next job, it might not be whatever it is that you're thinking, but we can see, and I can see in hindsight in our life, how God has worked the tapestry, and I definitely don't have a full picture of the tapestry, but there are certain bits where you can see it knitted together. You go, oh, that's what he was kind of doing there, and that's what he meant. And even
his
now,
faithfulness
his faithfulness completely,
It's just you process it off the cross, don't you? So like if he loves you enough to die for you, and for Jesus to come and die, then you can.
It'd be very strange for him to leave you now.
You can start to trust it. Yeah, you can start to trust him with the bits you don't understand when you see that. Yeah. Roger, what are the kind of, how has Christianity helped you in the midst of redundancy?
So I think part of it is being what Taran was talking about, the whole perspective that unfortunately her dad didn't have. So many of the guys that I work with, their whole identity is around their job because that gives them security, it gives them money, it gives them a feeling of status. It allows them to do the things that they want to do. And if that's what you aim for and you're then made redundant and you go through the things that I'm going through, so applying for jobs and not getting anywhere, where can you go? I'm just so thankful that my perspective is not on what job I've got, but on the future. You know, Jesus gave us a future when he died and rose again. He gives us a hope to look forward to. So it's really, you know, that's where I get that's why I get up in the morning. That's why I keep going, because you know, I know there's more that's coming. God's promised there's going to be more, and I trust that that's going to happen.
Yeah. We were talking the other day about just reading in the Bible all these stories in Psalms of people just crying out to God and saying, I know, why is this happening?
So this year I've been looking at the Psalms, which, to be honest, a few years ago I thought were quite boring. But somebody recommended that I look at this book, that I use this to study, and I go through all the Psalms in a year, and it's been incredible, absolutely incredible. You know, the promises. Some of you may have heard of King David, who was the Old Testament king that God promised was going to be his first king, and yet it didn't happen straight away. David had to wait. He had to go through lots of stuff. He cried out to God, you know, because he couldn't see how God's plan was going to come together. I'm not saying that I'm in the same position, but, you know, it gives me hope because you saw God's faithfulness in that position. And it wasn't just David. There's lots of people in the Psalms who were crying out to God and asking for him. And he always came through. He was always encouraging. He always was faithful to his words.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, it's so encouraging for me to hear just the, you know, I guess your faith's been put to the test, and just hearing you being willing to say, no, we keep our trust in Jesus. I guess one question people watching might be thinking is, you know, okay, you found this thing that, you know, this psychological crutch that you were accusing those Christians of back at university, Ken. Yeah. You know, you guys, you just think it's true because it works. Whereas we want to say, no, it works because it's true. It works because it's true. Like, what would you say to somebody if you happened to hand out a flyer, invite them to an event, and they knocked it out of your hand and said, take this psychological crutch away from me? Like, what would you respond now?
Yeah, I would encourage them to look at the evidence for themselves. Our faith is a historical faith. There's so much evidence that we have. Just historical evidence, how many manuscripts we have. There's so much evidence there that attests to the truth of what we believe. I'd love to walk someone through all of the masses of evidence that we have, because I find it so persuasive. It changed my life. Once I understood that this was something I could believe in, I could run to Jesus wholeheartedly, because I knew it could hold my weight.
Yeah, so we say it works because it's true, not true because it works.
Yeah.
And, that's an important thing. And maybe something that people would want to pick up in the Q&A. If you're watching this live, there'll be a chance to ask questions live to these guys. Or you can come along one time to Christchurch Bromley and see them across the room. And as long as you're in a group less than 6, you can talk to them and ask them yourself. I'm just going to give us a short reflection now, and I want to start just by telling you about 2 friends of mine. They're called Billy and Leslie, and just picture the scene that Billy is driving home from the car dealership where he works, but he's just been made redundant himself, and he's worried about where the money's going to come from, but he's also almost more worried about how Leslie's going to respond, because the last time he lost his job, he went back and he told Leslie, and she just descended into this kind of pit of anxiety and worry, and just took months to come out of that pit. And he sort of stumbled the words out, Leslie, they've let me go. And Billy was just blown away by Leslie turning to him and saying, well, that's all right, God will provide. when are you going to get yourself down to church? Now, Leslie had become a Christian a couple of months earlier, and her whole perspective on life had changed. And the first time I met Billy, he was coming down to church and saying, what's happened to my wife? And a few months later, he put his own trust in Jesus as he saw the difference it made, and as he saw the truth that we're talking about real facts of history, the Jesus who lived, died, lived again. Now, as you can tell from that story, as you can tell from the story of the people here, we're talking about perspective rather than a change of basic facts. Christians still face unemployment, and yet the perspective they have on that is radically different. We all experience basic facts of this world, but all of us look at the world through a kind of worldview. It's like we've got glasses on, goggles on, that distort and highlight some things and soft focus other things. And the glasses Leslie used to wear were glasses that just highlighted worry and despair in the face of a loss of job. But then as she put on the Christian glasses, instead she saw a God who was in control, who loved her, who was able to provide for her and gave her perspective. And I want to just share one verse with you from the Bible. Ken kind of hinted at it earlier on, but it's this verse. You'll see it on the screens. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good. All things work together for good. Now, to start off with, I guess you could look at that and you think, well, that is so kind of rose-tinted that it's just fairy tale-like. It just doesn't have any contact with reality. But I think once we understand the Bible's perspective on who God is and how he defines good, well, then you'll see how this verse is so precious to Christians. Because I think we could agree, whether you believe it or not at the moment, that this would be wonderfully precious if it was true, right? That there is somebody who takes all of the mess and rubbish that life throws at us and uses it for good, who loves us, who is in control. That would be precious, wouldn't it? So what does the Bible tell us about God? What perspective does it give us on God? And what perspective does it give us on good? Well, on God it says, yes, he is in complete control, as Ken was saying. He's not some mad inventor who's kind of lost control of what's going on. No, he's powerful and he's good. This world is full of good gifts from a good God, friends, family, fun. And those gifts are meant to take us not just to look at the gift, but to go back to the giver, God. But as you've been hearing, we're saying that the thing that most marks out God is actually the cross. That at the cross, God, as Jesus comes, he dies. He takes all of the punishment we deserve for all of our failure to love each other, to love and serve God. And he does it for us. That is the mark of his love for us. If you put those goggles on the world, do you see what difference that makes? That there is a God who loves us and is in control and can be trusted, even if we're only seeing the back of that tapestry. It changes our perspective on God, and it changes our perspective on good. When we stop and think about it, we know, as Roger was beginning to hint there, that the world's perspective on work doesn't always work. As we put the goggles of the world on, we find often overemphasis on money, on possessions, on just continued career progression at any cost, despite the cost to friends and family. Just that sense of that is what I must have. I must have that status. I must have that increased standard of living. And yet, we know, don't we, more money does not always buy more happiness. Increased standard of living does not always equal increased contentment. Work can be really, really hard. Work can be really, really hard. Work can damage relationships. No, but when we look through the Christian glasses, we see a God who, he made work as a good thing. We are to seek work. We are to work when we can and when God provides us with a job. But we see a God who is able to provide what we need, and he knows that not everything we want is actually good for us. What if actually our obsession with our status, with money, with possessions, what if those things actually damage our lives rather than help them? Christians are open to the idea that God is like a master surgeon, that he's got his scalpel in his hand and he makes a cut that hurts and yet ultimately is something that is for our good, even if we don't fully understand it at the time. Now the Christians see a God with a bigger definition of good than our employment status. He's asking, what are we trusting? Who are we becoming? One of the things he wants to do is humble us, to show us that we're not in control. He wants us to be humble so that we get that we don't have the power to help ourselves. Actually, we need to come to him. That's true in all of life, but it's true when it comes to becoming Christians. He needs us to be people who know that we've failed and can't solve it ourselves, no matter how high we try and pull our moral socks up. No, he knows that we need to come and say, no, I've got nothing. I can't do this. Please, forgive me. And that is a prayer he always listens to. Only when we realize we don't have the resources to impress God ourselves will we say, Jesus, I need your forgiveness. God, this perspective on who God is, it changes our view of the world. And this perspective on good lets us trust that God knows what is best for us. He wants us to know who we're trusting. He wants us to know who we're becoming as we learn to be patient. And he wants to know where we're going, that we trust him to take us to a world beyond death, where there's no more unemployment and no more sickness and mourning and crying and pain. Well, that's the main section here, looking at this topic of unemployment. And if you want to know how you could follow up, there are a few things that are going to just appear on the screen. Let me remind you of these. If you want to watch some of the other COVID conversations, you can go to the Christchurch Bromley YouTube page or gracechurchbeckenham.org, and you'll find a whole list of different ways that you can watch these videos and see other different ways you can follow up. One thing that people have found helpful is to look at something called get into the Bible for themselves with something called the Word One-to-One. On one side of the page, you'll see there's the text of what is actually John's account of Jesus' life. And then on the other side are notes that help us understand what's being said. Now, it's something you could look at on your own if you just go to the Word One-to-One website, but the clue's in the name, right? Like, it's the word one-to-one. This is something you could do online if you're not ready to enter a coffee shop at the moment. Sit down with maybe a Christian you know and just look at it together and talk about your different reactions to it. People have found that really helpful. And then another way is just to join us for one of the Christianity Explored Ministries courses. It's an interactive course. You watch a short DVD presentation, video presentation, and then get to discuss it in small groups. And if you want to find out more, contact the church office and you'll be able to find out more about that. But for now, we're going to have a chance for Q&A, and the way we're going to do that is coming up on the screen. We're going to use a website called slido.com, so you can Google Slido, or there's a link underneath the video, and if you end up on the main Slido page, you just have to use that event code, COVID Q&A. It's got to be a small c at the start, and that will enter you into the Q&A section, and you'll see you can type a question, and you'll see it's completely anonymous. And you can also see other questions other people are asking. And if you don't have a question yourself, but you think, yeah, that's the question I want to ask, then you can just vote that question up higher, and we'll get to that in a minute. But for now, we're just going to take a 2-minute pause just while questions start to roll in, and then we'll come back on to answer them. Great. I'm getting the nod from Adam. That says we are now live again with Q&A. So we've got a few questions coming in now. The first one is, I think it's a fair question to ask, isn't it? Do you think you'd change your mind about God if you never managed to find work? So it's all right to go without work for a few months, and for each of you guys, it happens to be you had enough money in the bank for that not to be a big hit in the first month or two. But what's it going to be like if the economy does implode the way some people worry, and just there aren't jobs out there, and the months turn into years? Like, are you going to stop trusting God in that circumstance? That's a tough question. Rog, let's just hand that bombshell straight to you. Off you go.
So as I was preparing for this, I was kind of thinking exactly what you've said. It's easy to say now, but what happens in the months ahead if things do? I like to say no, obviously.
Like to say no, you
no,
would
that
still
I wouldn't.
keep trusting.
Yes, sorry.
I can't remember which negative's right, but you would keep trusting.
I would keep.
Well,
I think I have to keep trusting in God, because it would take you to a point where you'd nothing else to trust in. If everything else is taken away, then God's that one anchor that you've got. He promises that all things turn to good for those who love Him. I think you have to just claim the promises to yourself and remind yourself, that things weren't always fine and dandy for guys in the Bible. Job, for one, went through an awful lot, yet he didn't lose his faith.
And it's just that definition of good thing, isn't it? Like, the definition of good is not limited to I must have a job soon.
And I think it's helpful to point out that God doesn't promise us smooth sailing in life.
No.
He doesn't promise that. And so it might be that my unemployment continues much longer than I'd want it to. But I'm not trusting in God for a job. That's not the reason I love God. I love God because of what He's done for me. He's given me this eternal future. And I continue to pray that my situation would change and the right job would come up at the right time. But even if it doesn't, I don't love Him because of the things that He gives me. I love Him because of what He's done for me.
I think I'd just point people back to some of the previous COVID conversations we've had. Like, some of the people who have been interviewed at a moment where something bad's happened, and then there's been some kind of solution happened. Whereas for other people, we talked about facing mortality, and they lost people and they're gone, and there hasn't been a solution. And I think one of the phrases we've kept saying in these conversations is, we judge God's love for us not on the basis of our present circumstance. We judge it on the cross and on the new creation. So at the cross, He proved He loved us by dying for us. Like, that is a measure of love. And we judge it by what He's preparing for us in eternity, a world with no more sickness and mourning and crying and pain. In this world, we will face trouble. We will get sick at some point and die. And yet we trust the God who overrules and will take us one day to a perfect world. And, that's one question people are asking. Another one is, where would you start looking at the evidence? Ken, do you want to say a bit more about this as our resident expert on the evidence?
Thanks, Matt. I think, as we talked about a bit earlier, lots of people think they know the evidence for the Bible, but they've never actually read the Bible for themselves. I think the first place to start is to read it for yourself and read these eyewitness accounts.
So this would be kind of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you'd start with that start of the New Testament rather than starting with Genesis.
And if you just think about the disciples' lives, and all the things that they went through that we read about in Acts and later on in the epistles. These are people whose lives were changed by meeting Jesus. If you still had questions, a good place to start might be something like Lee Strobel's Case for Christ, which gives a very nice breakdown and summarizes the evidence that we have available. And that's a good, easy place to start. But the first place would be read the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John for yourself.
And I was chatting to someone the other day who said they'd watched The Case for Christ been turned into a movie. Is it on Netflix at the moment?
Amazon, I think.
Oh yeah, other programs available, but it would be. I was chatting to somebody who wasn't a Christian and just saying, it's found it quite an interesting format and just evidence he wasn't expecting to find, and was kind of pretty surprised to see just how much evidence there is that Jesus really existed. No serious historian
raised from dead
doubts his existence, but then just that these eyewitnesses were utterly persuaded and were willing to go to their death, saying, I saw him die, and then I saw him alive again. I saw the miracles. I can't, even though it cost me a lot, I had to keep saying, no, this is real. And then somebody else is asking here, just tell us a bit more about what did Jesus say about work. So we've heard quite a lot about unemployment and not having work. Like, what does the Bible say? What does Jesus say about work? Taran, you haven't kicked us off yet. What are some of the kind of turning point, key
So what does
key
Jesus
truths?
say about work?
Yeah.
Work is good.
Yeah.
You know.
So he made us in the garden.
He made us
to
in the
work.
garden. Adam was told to work and look after the land and look after it, and there was work to be done there.
Yeah.
and how God continues to work. Jesus said that my Father is still at work. So
God continues to work every day.
Yeah. God delights to do work and to have us develop this world and improve this world and serve other people.
Yeah.
And
So work is important. I don't think, we should all sit at home and go, work. But it is an important fact.
Yeah.
But I don't think it is. The emphasis should be different, as opposed to, as you said earlier, sacrificing your entire family and relationships and everything else to pursue work to a degree where it, negates everything else. I don't think is what Jesus meant when he said work is good. Because work is good. And obviously it provides good things.
something we should pursue.
But
and there's I guess you got a couple of other sort of big truths in the Bible. One is that work is made good, but the fall has happened. Like we live in a world where work is just frustrated and where relationships are frustrated. And many of us will know that it's not just the basic work and the kind of the way that the thorns and thistles seem to fight back in life, but it's just the pain of soured relationships in the workplace.
Yes.
Like that is just the reality of the world in which we live now. And yet we're called to serve other people. So there's a verse in the Bible that says, let the thief no longer steal. Instead, let him do something with his hands in order that he may provide for others who have need. So there's a sense of I work not just to provide for myself, to save other people having to provide for me, but I work in order to have something to give to others. And sometimes God just stops you being able to do the work that you would most able to let you provide for other people. I mean, that's the situation you guys find yourself in at the moment. And, Roger's right that the job at the moment is the full-time job God is giving you at the moment is finding a new job, as well as telling other people, and hopefully God using you to just give people some hope in the face of their own unemployment. I think we will call our Q&A session to a close there with that. But on behalf of all the people at home, I will give a thorough round of applause to Ken and Taran. Thank you so much That one clap that echoes around the building. Great. Long live the days when there are no more COVID restrictions and we can do these things live and in person. But we hope you've enjoyed tonight or whenever it is you're watching this. We'd love to know your honest feedback, so get in touch via one of the websites. And yeah, see you again in a few weeks. Yet to be confirmed exactly when, but we're hoping to do a session on mental health as our next one. So it's a little sneak preview of what's coming up. But otherwise, signing off.